Two people can earn the exact same salary, live in the exact same city, and still make completely different decisions the moment money enters the conversation. And the reason has almost nothing to do with how much either of them currently has. One of them was raised watching every purchase get calculated against what might run out. The other was not. And by the time both of them reach adulthood, one of them is still running a program installed decades earlier, a program that was never updated when the actual danger disappeared. This is not a story about willpower. It is not a story about discipline or budgeting apps or trying harder. What you are about to hear is closer to a technical malfunction, one that was installed for survival and never uninstalled once survival stopped being the issue. Researchers who study scarcity have a term for what happens to a mind under constant resource pressure. They call it tunneling. When resources are tight, attention narrows sharply onto the immediate threat, and everything outside that narrow tunnel becomes harder to notice, harder to plan for, harder to care about. This is not a flaw in the person. It is a feature of the brain doing exactly what it evolved to do under pressure. And it works. In the short term, tunneling makes people sharper, faster, more resourceful about the one problem directly in front of them. The cost only shows up later, when the same narrowed focus keeps operating long after the actual emergency has passed. Here is the part that tends to upset people the first time they hear it. A person can grow up, build a stable income, and still make every decision as if the emergency from childhood is still happening in the present moment, and calling that person bad with money misunderstands the entire mechanism. Their brain is not broken. It is running an old survival protocol on a threat that no longer exists, and no spreadsheet has ever successfully argued with a nervous system. There is a well-known field study involving farmers whose income depended on a single seasonal harvest. Researchers tested the same individuals twice, once shortly before the harvest when money was scarce, and once shortly after when money was plentiful. The measurable difference in cognitive performance between those two moments was significant, and it had nothing to do with intelligence changing. It had everything to do with how much mental bandwidth scarcity was consuming in one version of the same person and not the other. Now apply that same mechanism to a childhood spent inside financial scarcity, stretched out not across one season, but across the years when a young brain is doing its most active wiring. Consistent findings in this area point to lasting changes in how the brain processes threat, particularly in regions tied to emotional reaction and self-control. Children raised in chronic scarcity tend to develop heightened sensitivity to potential loss and reduced sensitivity to potential gain. And this pattern does not politely disappear once the person becomes a fully functioning adult with a steady paycheck. It becomes the default lens the brain uses to evaluate every financial decision that follows, including ones that have nothing to do with survival anymore. If you are already recognizing pieces of yourself in this, here is the part worth sitting with before we go any further. Awareness alone does not rewrite the pattern, but it is the first move that makes rewriting possible, and staying close to material like this is exactly how that awareness gets reinforced instead of forgotten by next week. The trap hidden inside all of this is that the behaviors scarcity created often look responsible on the surface. Hoarding resources looks like frugality. Refusing to spend on anything outside immediate necessity looks like discipline. Constant vigilance around money looks like maturity. But protocols built for survival and protocols built for growth are not the same thing. And mistaking one for the other is how a person can work incredibly hard for decades and still feel like nothing has actually changed underneath. There is a specific test worth applying to your own financial instincts. When a decision involves money, notice whether the reaction happening in your body arrived before any actual thinking did. A scarcity response fires first and explains itself afterward. A present, adult decision considers the actual current situation first without a pre-written script running the outcome in advance. This single distinction, noticed consistently over time, is often enough to start separating an old threat response from an actual choice. None of this requires confronting your entire childhood in one sitting. It starts smaller than that. It starts with catching one reaction in real time, naming it honestly as an old pattern rather than current reality, and letting that single moment of separation do more work than any amount of self-criticism ever could. The nervous system does not update through force. It updates through repeated evidence that the emergency is actually over, evidence that has to be supplied deliberately, one moment at a time, because nobody else is going to supply it for you. The version of you that grew up believing there was never enough does not get to run today's decisions unless you keep handing it the controls. Build your awareness into a shield the old alarm cannot talk its way past, and never let a program written when you were a child keep pulling the strings on the person you are now.